To do this job effectively, the welding inspector must have a wide range of knowledge and skills because it involves more than simply looking at welds. Consequently, this course is specifically designed to provide both experienced and novice welding personnel a basic background in the more critical job aspects. This does not imply that welding personnel will use all of this information while working for a particular company. Nor does it mean that the material presented will include all of the information for each welding personnel's situation. Selection of these various topics is based on the general knowledge desirable for an individual to do general welding inspection. Before turning our discussion to the technical subjects, let us talk about the welding inspector as an individual and the typical responsibilities that accompany the position. The welding inspector is a responsible person involved in the determination of weld quality according to applicable codes and/or specifications. In the performance of inspection tasks, welding inspectors operate in many different circumstances, depending primarily for whom they are working. For this reason, there is a special need for the job specifications due to the complexity of some components and structures. The specialist, on the other hand, is an individual who does some specific task or tasks in the inspection process. A specialist may or may not act independently of an overseer. The non-destructive examination, or NDE specialist, is an example of this category of inspector. This individual has limited responsibilities in the welding inspection process. It is common to see inspectors serving as both overseer and specialist. Such an individual may be responsible for general weld quality judgments in each of the various fabrication steps, and be required to perform any non-destructive testing that is necessary. Fabricators may employ several overseer-type inspectors, each having their own area of general weld inspection responsibility. Because inspection responsibility is divided in these cases, inspectors may have to rely on others for specific aspects of the total inspector program. The first quality, and perhaps the most important quality, is a professional attitude. Professional attitude is often the key factor for a welding inspector's success. The inspector's attitude often determines the degree of respect and cooperation received from others during the performance of inspection duties. Included in this category is the ability of the welding inspector to make decisions based on facts so that inspections are fair, impartial, and consistent. If decisions are unfair or show partiality or inconsistency, they greatly affect the inspector's credibility. A welding inspector must be completely familiar with the job requirements so that decisions are neither too critical nor too lax. It is a mistake for the inspector to have preconceived ideas as to a component's acceptability. Inspection decisions must be based on facts, the condition of the weld, and the acceptance criteria specified in the applicable specification must be the determining factors. Inspectors will often find themselves being tested by other personnel on the job, especially when newly assigned to some task. Maintaining a professional attitude helps overcome obstacles to successful job performance. Next, the welding inspector should be in good physical condition. Since the primary job involves visual inspection, obviously the welding inspector should have good vision, whether natural or corrected. The AWS CWI program requires the inspector to pass an eye examination, with or without corrective lenses, to prove near vision acuity on Jagger J2 at 12 inches, and complete a color perception test. Another aspect of physical condition involves the size of some of the welded structures. Welds can be located anywhere on very large structures, and inspectors must often go into these areas and make evaluations. Inspectors should be in good enough physical condition to go to any location where the welder has been. This does not imply that inspectors must violate safety regulations just to perform their duties. Inspection can often be hampered if not done immediately after welding, because access aids for the welder, such as ladders and scaffolding, may be removed, making inspection impossible or dangerous. Within safety guidelines, welding inspectors should not let their physical condition prevent them from doing the inspection properly. Most people associated with welding inspection will agree that having inspection experience is very important. Textbooks and classroom learning cannot teach an inspector all the things needed to inspect effectively. Experience will aid the welding inspector in becoming more efficient. Better ways of thinking and working will develop with time. Experience will also help the inspector develop the proper attitude and point of view regarding the job. Experience gained working with various codes and specifications improves an inspector's understanding of welding requirements and generally improves job effectiveness. To emphasize the need for inspection experience, we often see a novice inspector paired with an experienced one, so the proper techniques can be passed along. Finally, we see that inspector certification programs require some minimum level of experience for qualification. The ability to be trained is a necessity for the job of welding inspector. Often, an individual is selected for this position based primarily on this attribute. Inspectors do their job most effectively when they are receiving training in a variety of subjects. By gaining additional knowledge, inspectors become more valuable to their employers. A final attribute, which is not taken lightly, is the welding inspector's ability to complete and maintain inspection records. The welding inspector must accurately communicate all aspects of the various inspections, including the results. All records developed should be understandable to anyone familiar with the work. Reports that can only be understood by the welding inspector are useless when they are unavailable. Therefore, neatness is important as well. The welding inspector should look at these reports as their permanent records should a question arise later. When reports are generated, they should contain information regarding how the inspection was done so, if necessary. It can be duplicated later by someone else with similar results. Once records have been developed, the welding inspector should facilitate easy reference later. The communication between the welder and inspector is important to the attainment of quality work. If there is good communication, each individual can do a better job. Welders can discuss problems they encounter or ask about specific quality requirements. For example, suppose the welders are asked to weld a joint having a root opening that is so tight that a satisfactory weld cannot be accomplished. They may contact the inspector to pass judgment and get the situation corrected right then, rather than after the weld is rejected for being made improperly. When effective communication occurs, the welding inspector has the opportunity to supply answers and/or begin corrective action to prevent the occurrence of some problem. The communication between the welder and an inspector is usually improved if the welding inspector has some welding experience. Then the welder has more confidence in the inspector's decisions. If there is poor communication between these two parties, quality can suffer. Welding engineers rely heavily on welding inspectors to be their eyes on the shop floor or construction site. Engineers count on the inspector to spot problems relating to the techniques and processes specified. The welding inspector can also confirm whether specified procedures are being followed. The welding inspector, in turn, can ask the welding engineer about certain aspects of those procedures as well. Often, if a welding procedure is not producing consistent, reliable results, the welding inspector may be the first person to spot the problem. At that point, the welding engineer is notified so that adjustments can be made to alleviate the problem. The welding inspector will probably work under the direction of some supervisor. This individual is responsible for verifying a welding inspector's qualifications for verifying the work. The supervisor should also answer the inspector's questions and aid in the interpretation of quality requirements. In some industry situations, the welding inspector must bring all questions to the supervisor. In turn, the supervisor takes that question to someone in engineering, purchasing, etc. The welding inspector must convey a question clearly, so it can be described properly by the inspection supervisor to the other party. Finally, the welding inspector will have some occasion to discuss job scheduling with production personnel. This occurs especially when rejections have been noted that could alter the production schedule. It is important for the welding inspector to keep the production personnel aware of the status of the welding inspection, so that schedules can be adjusted if necessary. As indicated, depending on the welding inspector's specific job description, they may not deal with all those mentioned earlier, or the inspector may communicate with others not discussed here. It is important to realize that all will benefit if some effective communication takes place, so surprises do not occur during fabrication. When we talk of communication, we are not limiting our attention to speaking. There are several ways that people communicate. They include speaking, writing, drawing, gesturing, and the use of pictures and photographs. Each situation may be dealt with using one or more of these methods. The method is not as important as the fact that communication occurs. Messages are sent, received, and understood by all concerned.